have conversations with people about the things you love, right?
It is.
It's the beautiful thing about podcasts.
That is true. It's thoroughly enjoying. What are you drinking? I'm having tea.
Black coffee.
Oh, I'm having an infusion with, I think, red berries.
Infusion of red berries for any particular reason?
Taste.
Probably the best thing for why you want to do something, because it tastes good, not because it helps with your joints or helps with your eyesight or helps you see animals better in the dark.
No, I just really enjoy red berries.
What red berries? What is that? Is that a fruit
Oh,
or
it's a mix
something out of the woods?
yeah, it's just a mix of fruits. So I think it's raspberries, strawberries, other berries that are red.
Just red berries.
Just red berries.
And did you, given the topic of our conversation, did you harvest any of these red berries yourself, or did you purchase them from the grocery store?
Oh, I didn't. They are purchased because first of all, it's not the season, so better to actually have dried leaves, dried fruits. And the second thing is that where I'm based in France, it's really, 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 really dry and really warm in the summer. So it's and I'm really often away, so it's tricky to just grow things and make sure that they don't die. Specifically, raspberries, for example.
Are you saying you don't have a green thumb?
I
Therese?
do, I
You
do
do?
actually, I do, but I'm so often away, and it's so dry here that it's a bit of a it's not really compatible because I would need to water it every single day. But if I'm land rovering somewhere in the remote, I don't know, in Eastern Europe, for example, I cannot water the salads.
Very true. Very true. Does France have natural berries? Like, do you have natural berries? I think blackberries for sure, right? Because I think I've even walked through some blackberry briars in France. Do they have any other natural berries occurring in the forests?
Yes, actually, the majority of plants that are in France and in a lot of Western Europe are actually edible. So unless there's a couple of big plants that you just happen to know that are just do not touch, do not eat. But other than that, we have a lot of berries. My favorites are the tiny forest strawberries. They're super small. They are probably as thick as the end of your pinky, and they grow very low in various forests of Western Europe and in Eastern Europe as well. We've got some I don't know how it's called. It's a plant that is full of vitamin C. It's red again.
Rose, is it rose hips?
Yes, it is. When we were
See,
kids.
I can read your mind.
Look at that, with about I don't know how many miles separating us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you were just generally randomly, because we have the same thing here. We have rose hips here.
Yeah.
High in vitamin C. A lot of people gather them and whatnot. So, yeah.
Yeah, but when I grew up at school, they would tell us that they were toxic. So I grew up being afraid of wanting to play with those little berries because when you pick them, they become really, really, really hard. So you would be able to just throw them at people, and it was really fun. But I had I had been taught that it was toxic, so it was a nice discovery a couple of years later to realize it wasn't.
Where did you grow up, Therese?
In Belgium.
In Belgium. Where in Belgium?
So I'm originally from the Ardennes, so it's the southern part of Belgium.
Isn't that the corner? Belgium, Holland, Germany, like everybody is together?
Yeah, we are. It's a very small country. It's bigger than Luxembourg and it's bigger than the Netherlands. But Belgium is that little country that is shaped like a little man wearing a backpack. And so where I am from is the foot of Belgium. So basically it's the southern part of Belgium, and we were about 2 hours from the Luxembourg area, which is another country, so it's not Belgium. We did have we do have an area in Belgium called Province du Luxembourg, which is the province of Luxembourg. That's dating back from the Middle Age, but that's not Luxembourg. That's effectively Belgium.
I remember being in Maastricht
Yeah.
in Holland and thinking it was the coolest thing in the world that I rode my bicycle from Holland into Belgium, into Germany, back into Holland.
It's a solid little trip, but yes, it is. We are pretty blessed with that in Western Europe because the countries are rather small and they have such a strong heritage that you can be in southern Belgium in the morning, northern Belgium in the afternoon, and then have dinner in the Netherlands in the evening.
Yeah, we drove last year, middle of May, we drove out of Paris into, gosh, I can't even remember the town now in Belgium. But we were in southern Belgium.
So, Mons?
I'll have to look it up as we're talking.
Yeah.
But we went and did a project that we've just finished production on, which is it's probably only going to release, I would say, this time next year. We want to come to there's like a big hunting convention in Paris.
Yes, there is.
Paris la Chasse or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a project called, and my French people who listen to this are going to kill me because they've been giving me French lessons, so I'm going to try and get it right. Sauvons Bombi. Sauvons Bombi.
Oh, Sauvons Bambi.
See, I'm messing it up again. Sauvons Bombi. I want to say Bambi constantly, and they're like, no, Robbie, you got to get it right.
Yeah.
So saving Bambi.
Yes.
And was absolutely, I can't even remember the town we were in. We were in such a tiny little town. We drove into this little cabin in the middle of nowhere, met a guy, William Rentience, and we went and had dinner at another little town. It was just awesome.
So what's the concept?
The concept was really the idea that hunting organizations and hunters are saving Bambi every year from middle of May to the middle of June.
Yep,
right?
That's
know
right.
This.
Yep, very much.
The hunters know of the project extremely well, but nobody outside the hunting community, again, that's the reason why I exist, is nobody outside the hunting community knows that story. It's such a cool story.
Well, in Belgium, as you know, probably, they have initiatives that are basically people that you can...
They've got an organization called Sauvons Bambi.
I know, it's Sauvons Bambi, and it's just so fantastic because, well, we know about it.
We actually gave Sauvons Bambi, we paid for all of the administrative and support funding last year through Blood Origins. Paid for a drone, we bought a drone, we did everything.
You know, the first time I heard about Sauvons Bambi, because I'm Belgian, but I did my license in France because I'm based in France.
What license? Your hunting license?
Yes, my hunting license. Because here you need, I don't know how it is in the US, but you need a hunting license if you want to be legally hunting.
Yeah, same in the States. Yeah, you have to do your hunter's education here in the United States. Same thing in France?
Yes, so it's much more pushed in Belgium than it is in France. It's not pushed in the sense that the content is more complete. It's just a different dynamic. So in France, you have got theoretical courses and practical courses. In Belgium as well. In Belgium, you're required to hit targets. In France, you are required to understand security more than hitting targets, for example. So it's just a bit of a different approach.
Yeah, in America, we do not have any shooting requirements at all. It's just a practical test that you do on a state level. Typically the game agency, so it's the environmental agency of the state that looks after the game resources, are the ones who put on the hunter education classes. And then you go out, I think you shoot a 2-2, but that's mainly just to understand mechanics of shooting. Yeah. It's not a proficiency exam at all.
Understood. Interesting. In France it's different because, well, the country is big and the...
Huge. You guys have got there's so many hunting federations and little hunting federations. It's crazy.
Yes, the organization of the hunting federation is so important because it basically it's a way, for example, to protect the how do you say that in English? Well, to protect hunters, to protect hunting, but it's also a way of actually working in very close collaboration with the farmers and the people in the world of agriculture. Simply because there is no one else than the hunters who fund the damage caused by wildlife on fields, for example.
Yeah, you're bringing up something that was also very astounding to me, in that the hunting federation that we were with north of Paris was a small hunting federation. Wasn't, had 20,000 hunters in the federation. They had 26 full-time people working for them.
Yeah.
And outside of the hunting season, their jobs were human-wildlife conflict, injured animals, working with farmers.
Yes.
It was almost like, again, akin to wildlife services here in America. That's a government-led organization. Mm-hmm. There it was led by hunters, paid for by hunters.
Yeah, it's the Federation of Hunters in France is so important because it helps with the discussions that are happening, whether it's with the government or also with the animal activists, because there is a lot of very difficult conversation that I'm sure are happening in the US as well. Conversation, let's say unilateral message sent out by animal activists towards an audience that is not particularly educated on the topic of hunting, meaning that there is false information going through. The Hunters Federation of France is really, really, really present in re-articulating ideas and thoughts, also functioning, but also is important in the management for the wildlife, simply because, as you know, we don't start hunting just by pulling the trigger and that's it. But yes, it's not governmental. The only thing that's governmental is the Organisation Nationale des Forêts, the ONF, and those guys are working with the Hunters Federation, but they are not the Hunters Federation. It's the ONF that gives your license. I'm going to try and find mine because it's actually...
I know what you mean.
Really well. It's actually very clear. It's not on ONF, it's Office Français de la Biodiversité. They rename themselves every couple of years. So OFB, that's the name.
Mm-hmm.
And then they are the one giving you your card that gets you gives you the right.
Well done putting your fingers in front of all your information.
Not desiring to have other people take my little card. But yeah, it's completely different because those guys are not the hunters. So it's important to understand that the hunting federation, is really making that bridge between the hunters and the government, because the OFB is the government and the hunters are the hunters.
Nice. Yeah, that's the whole point of why we exist, is to push a narrative into, not against the anti-hunters really, because you're not going to there's 10% of the people in this world that you're never going to change their minds. Okay. And it's funny, in the last couple of weeks, some of the interactions that we've had online has really even more cemented in my brain this idea that there are certain people in this world that value animals more than humans.
Yes.
Okay. That's it.
Yes.
And it's funny where you read these comments about, and one of them, which is absolutely tragic and awful, is we've had an instance of terrorism occur in northern Mozambique. I don't know if you've heard of it or not, but there's been some anti-trophy hunting people celebrating this and saying, oh, it's a reprieve for animals because hunters can't come in there. But the actual consequence of this action are people being beheaded.
Yeah.
Communities being, losing their livelihood, people losing their jobs and whatnot. And you get this thread of people saying, oh, good thing they should have. And then I saw another post it was a meme of a judge and jury mixed between animals and people. And the animals as the jury to the people said in this meme, because of your out of control population, you need to cull yourselves by 15%. And the thing was, it was posted by obviously an animal rights organization, and they were like, what do you think we should do? Should we cull 15% of the people of this world? And people on the comments were like, no, 85%, 95%, whatnot. And I stopped myself from commenting because it would draw unwelcome attention. But my comment would have been, if you think this is a great idea, okay, let's start with you.
Mm-hmm. It's very much
because you're part of the human
first
population, right? You're part of this human population, and you're suggesting that there's a need to reduce them. So you're making the choice on who?
Yes.
And more likely, what you're going to be choosing is the poorest of the poor that are sitting at the front lines of human-wildlife conflict, not the people that are sitting in, an apartment in Paris. Since you're from France, that is
from Belgium, that's based in.
Excuse me, from Belgium. Or somebody sitting in Brussels. Somebody sitting in Brussels. I didn't know that there was such an animosity between French and Belgian.
Oh, we don't have an animosity. We just like things to be right.
Understood.
I'm just teasing.
I know. I'm teasing you back. And it's just like, it's craziness. It's craziness that this person thinks I'm going to advocate for the reduction of human population, but it's not me.
No.
Don't target me.
No.
Somebody else needs to be targeted.
It's always striking questions for me, because obviously the world of hunting is very different in Western Europe than it is in Eastern Europe, than it is in the US, than it is in Africa, simply because of the size of territories for animals. So if we're talking very simply on the topic of whether it's relevant or not still to this day, because for example in France today, 1 person out of 5 is for hunting, so for the practice. 4 out of 5 people are against the practice of hunting. So that's the latest.
But in what form, shape or form was that survey numbers done? Hunting, not just meat hunting, management hunting.
No, it's basically 89% of French people are. So it's a study made that was conducted by Ipsos, which is an organism that basically does data gathering. And long story short, what the result is that 89% of the French in France perceive hunting as striking problems security problems for walkers. So that's the first thing. It's absolutely bonkers when we actually know how effectively hunting happens in France during weekends or during the week, or how it's organized in terms of practicalities when you go out to hunt. And then the second thing is that we actually have 1 in 5 people in France that is for huntings, and the rest is just against it for whatever reason. So it's referring to what you were saying regarding people saying, we should decrease population, etc. And if we make a bridge with this study, what we can see is that there is a clear misunderstanding of first what hunting is and does and why it's there, but also that there is a clear misunderstanding of the concept of violence, because hunting is, in the end, it's literally finishing an animal, it's killing an animal, but on the other, so that's a violent act in the sense that you take life away from something. So that means, and that implies, that if you're an educated adult or educated individual, that comes with a great responsibility. So you don't take something away without bringing something more to the table or organizing something to be better. And we have a responsibility for this. So why I was talking about Europe is because the territories are so much smaller. If we're talking about the place that an animal has had in history over an area, it just keeps on reducing, because in Europe, what we have is small territories because of the size of the countries. So that's the first thing. The size of the country is effectively small. The second thing is that we've got a growing number of population. That's a whole different topic. But realistically speaking, there's just more people in smaller places. So that means more people per square kilometer. That means if there's more humans, there is more inhabited for humans, which means houses, buildings, etc., which also means less space for animals. And you know as good as I do that animals have got roots. That's literally written, encrypted in their DNA, whether we like it or not. That's why a pheasant will cross a road without realizing that he's crossing a road, because it's not supposed to have a road there, because it's encrypted in his DNA. And we have a problem of allocation of resource, not in terms of there is too much or not enough, but there is a lack of balance. So this is leading me to the point of we've got an expansion of cities, we've got a rural exodus, which means that you've got less people to take care of the environment, not environment as the plants and making it look pretty, but rather the environment as how do we make this space in which we are living for a determined limited amount of time, how are we making sure that we take care of it so it is as good or better than we have found it for the next generation after us. This is so important because an expansion of cities means an expansion of city territory, which means that the natural habitat of wildlife in cities, I'm thinking very, very basic level, pigeons, you know, all the small things, all the small feathers, but also bigger animals that are now causing problems. So we've got so many foxes that are spreading diseases and trashing bins and making cities really dirty. We're talking about boars that are just walking around and between quotation
there's pigs in like downtown Rome, right? Or Milan or something like that in Italy. It's crazy.
Between quotation marks, scaring people off in their back garden. The reality is not that those animals, it's not a question whether they have to be there or not, it's just whether how do we articulate this? Because if they are there, there is probably a reason. Either there's food available, such as bears in Canada that are around cities because it's easy, but they also just have less food in their environment because their environment is just too small. So it's just a perpetual conversation, a perpetual discussion on how we actually take care of our environment to make sure that there is a balance between what we are taking as hunters and how we are ensuring that the populations that are there are remaining healthy, because nobody wants a sick animal, because a sick wild animal means a risk for the agriculture. That has got a dramatic impact on the food chain. As you know, we eat meat. That meat is coming from a cow or a pig. I personally would prefer to eat. I would prefer to eat game meat that has been running in the fields than pig that's been growing up in 1 square meter. And you know
where it came from. You know where it came from. You know potentially if it was undertaken by you from a hunting perspective, yes. You understood how it died. You understand where it died. You understand the
what
hands that have touched
it.
The meat. Everything, all about it.
And it's not been growing up in a 1 square meter box like the majority of pigs today. That's 1 square meter is not out of thin air. It is effectively 1 square meter for a pig. So it brings that perspective back. It has a huge impact on absolutely everything. But the complexity is that the media is putting the spotlight on the wrong point of the discussion, which is whether it's good or not to kill, where actually maybe we just need to take a step back and figure out how can we be a bit more logical with the food that we are eating.
Yeah, you're absolutely nailing it. Everywhere in the world, and I use this a lot, and I use it big, and I use it a lot, and we say things often and on repeat because we want people to be able to infuse it into their brains, and we want people to be able to articulate, and we want people to have confidence in speaking about these kinds of things with others around dinner tables, at the bus stop, you name it. But people will say, and I use elephants as a good example because it's something that people are like, whoa, that's a big animal. It needs a lot of space. It needs a lot of things, right? It needs a lot of resources, 600, 800 kilograms of vegetation a day to feed an elephant. Now, people will say, oh, we've lost 90% of elephants in Africa. It's not untrue. Okay. But what are they basing that change from? They're basing that change from the 1500s, where you potentially had 5 million elephants in Africa. Okay. Not unrealistic. Because if you think back in the 1500s, how much space did you have potentially for elephants to roam between southern tip of southern Africa all the way up to Kenya? Okay, that whole area. And I said this on a podcast the other day. It was almost like we had pinpricks of humanity in that area. So we had the sea of habitat with pinpricks of humanity. Well, today we have a sea of humanity with pinpricks of habitat or islands of habitat.
Absolutely.
And so you can't expect us to have 5 million elephants again.
No.
you've got to come to the realization of like, well, what is this number? Like, how many elephants can we have? And I believe we have actually too many elephants right now. It's just over 500,000 elephants, 500,000 elephants. I think in that is taking into consideration overpopulated areas like Botswana and Zimbabwe. So I think we're at our capacity right now. Unless you explore places like Angola, Congo, Zaire, those places that are really conflict areas that are, very, very large countries, human population quite hasn't exploded yet. Not. But Therese, maybe it's an opportunity here to ask the question of you: why are the people in Belgium and France not understanding this?
Because there's this is actually a very good question, because it's, again, very misunderstood. There is such a gap between the reality of hunting and what the common, your average Joe is thinking about it, that it really makes me question how people live their life. Not in a negative way when I'm saying this, but there's a couple of factors that have been impacting this. One of them is that there is, in the end of the years 1990, so 1990, between 1990 and 2005, I can't remember exactly when it was, there is a group of people who do comedy, and it was the beginning of the booming of comedy on TV, and they're called Les Inconnus, and they're very, very famous in France. They made a whole episode about the hunters, and they were just making fun of the hunters. And it's true, the hunters in the late 1919, early 2000, often were matching the stereotype that was in that video. And it was hilarious. And probably 90% of the people who have seen that video in France and in Belgium are laughing about it. And it's a running gag still to this day. The problem is that it was also something that gained so much popularity that people who had never been in contact with hunting just took for face value. Even though it was a satire, it was taken as for face value. I'm not saying that this is the reason why people are so against the practice today. But what I'm saying is that it has helped create a narrative that has been absolutely biased over the years. Additionally, the context of hyper securing everything in Europe was very, very trendy, specifically in Belgium and in France, since the beginning of this century. That it has caused.
What do you mean, hyper securing?
Yeah, hyper securing. So, for example, when I grew up, you would have playgrounds in Belgium. Visiting France, you would have playgrounds that would be considered today dangerous for children because they had no side rails and they had no extra security rope and they had no indication on how to safely use the playground. Fast forward, so I'm the eldest of a family of five children. My last brother grew up on playgrounds that had all those little signposts and signboards stating, be careful, watch out, it's dangerous, do not, don't jam your fingers, whatever. So that's what I mean by hyper, well, not it's hyper safety basically. So it's
Yeah,
making the person not responsible for its own self in an environment. It is basically stating, be careful, don't do this because this is dangerous for any person that has been traveling to Paris and has taken the metro, so the underground or the tube. They will see a little sticker on the doors of the metro or the underground that's a little rabbit, and it says something in the lines of, careful, don't put your hands in the door when it closes because you'll jam your fingers. This is a little bit silly because any sane individual would be mindful of an opening of a door because they know that
and if you did get your fingers stuck in the door, it would be a lesson learned. Like, oh, I'm not going to do that again.
Exactly. So if we take this parallel and align it with hunting, there's a couple of things that have happened. First of all, hunting involves gun. Okay, that is true. But you also have got bow and arrow. So arbalète, I don't know how it's called. It's a horizontal bow and arrow.
Oh, crossbow.
Crossbow.
Nice. See?
Learning every day.
Teaching French. I'm teaching you English. You're teaching me French.
We're a pair. This is great.
There we go.
And so what has happened is that there has been a big dissociation between the element of risk on one side and the element of danger. So it's been risk management and dangers have been put in the same bag. The second thing is that there's been the element of, Bambi. Beautiful, beautiful movie from Disney. It's so tragic. He loses his dad, needs to grow up with a single mother, whatever. Nobody wanted to kill Bambi anymore. And then there's another thing is that there was this dissociation between real life and between what hunting was, because hunting is, again, it's a lifestyle because it takes months, weeks, months, years sometimes to decide which animal we are going to be taking from a group for what reason. You need to follow these animals, you need to track them. The effective killing of the animal is part of the job, but it's such a minimum, like it's the smallest element actually.
Yeah.
It is the smallest action in the grand scheme of things. It's the smallest action. It's
it's funny you say that. It's literally, obviously we have to differentiate ourselves between hunting and hiking, right?
Yes.
And the differentiator is that we kill something. Okay, that is, we are seeking to kill something. Mm-hmm. That is the ultimate purpose of what we do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's interesting in that there's sort of some philosophical, theological sort of mind wrestles that not many people undertake, i.e., in hunting, when you kill, it means it's the end of the activity, which is both sad because you liked the activity, but is also happy because you accomplished the activity.
And it's the start of something else as well, because, you finish an animal, then if you want to be logical, you need to honor the animal that you have taken. And the best way you can do that is by literally using every single part of that animal.
Yep, I totally agree. And so as you said, and unfortunately, and again, this is, I totally put the blame on us, okay, from a hunting perspective. I totally do in this scenario, in which the general public has boiled down hunting to just that 1% of the 100, which is killing the animal. Mm-hmm. And 99% of hunting, as you said, is everything else, right? Looking after the animal's habitat. Animal welfare is something that we should have a feather in our cap on. We should be yelling from the tops of the mountains of how we are probably the biggest proponents of animal welfare, i.e. we're looking after animals constantly. Yes. We're thinking about them. The way that we kill them, the way that we practice to kill them, the way that we honor the animal, all these things are just like right up the alley of animal welfare, sort of check the box exercises. But I think, again, going back to what I said, I think hunters are to blame. I think hunters have not championed this whole 99% narrative. And here's why. Because 99% is not sexy.
Well,
to hunters, they want to see an animal killed. They want to see the animal dying. They want to see that because that's the thing that they love. That's the part of the activity. And yet, so we've just focused on that. We haven't focused on the other 99%.
Interesting. Very interesting take. I would absolutely agree with you on this. I would like to add that...
Think about it. What magazines? You pick up a hunting magazine. What do you see in a hunting magazine?
Well, you see, of course, what you have been hunting. Where I was going to go was that European hunts are very traditional, if we're talking about even how they came about and how it has happened. And so I think that there is also the fact that hunters do not focus on the communication of the 99%, not because it's not sexy, but because it's just requiring so much effort and implication and personal investment. So I would say that when we are talking about associations or groups that are animal activists, for example, they have entire organization of communication. So they've got communication studios, they have got communication guidelines. It's a very well articulated and well managed machine, which I would believe that the group of hunters would be able to actually learn a lot from, because the communication aspect of things is really well done on their side. On our side, what is happening is that we are so invested in our private life, in our work life, and in our hunting life that it leaves very little time, if we want to do things with great focus and attention, to create a communication around all the 99%. Because often what is going to happen is that you'll go after your working hours, track that animal, or see a couple of groups that you've been spotting the previous season to see how it's been doing. And you will do that in a way that's literally either after work or that you'll take a day for it, but you won't think about the communication about this simply because you're so focused on the action itself, which is fantastic, because that means that it is effectively what's happening. And the other thing is that hunting is such a social aspect that if you're in the group, you will take part in that activity. So you will live it. And you won't need to explain it simply because you are taken in that activity. It is literally a lifestyle. I remember the hunters, when I grew up around my house, they would gather a Saturday morning, early morning, and you would have that. It's beautiful. You would have the mist that's not raised yet, and there's an atmosphere that's just impossible to explain. And you're sitting there with them, and you just take it in. So of course, the hunter is a hunter. That's what they are. That's what he does. He's not a storyteller. And the reason why we see...
Why not?
No,
he's
he
supposed
is.
to be the best storyteller in the world.
He is, around the campfire. But he's not a communicator, in the sense that the only reason why you see a picture of a trophy is because that's the physical thing that can be shown afterwards. But realistically speaking, the rest is literally, it's life. And before social media, you would have books about it. You would have maybe VHS, for those who have known that. Maybe you would have Super 8s, and you would have writings about it, but you wouldn't have a whole depiction, a whole film made about it, simply because you had the hunter that was hunting, and then every single person involved has a task. When you're running after an animal, or when you are scouting something, or when you're observing something, there is no margin for noise, because you are leaving the space for what is important, which is literally what's happening in front of you. And so us hunters have now, we are graced with the important duty of communication, because we need to emphasize why it is important, how it makes a difference, and make it feel closer to the people who are so disconnected from that world of the 99% what is happening behind the curtain. Luckily, communication is becoming easier these days, and then we've got people like you who do fantastic podcasts, which is great because it allows that message to come across. But the individual hunter itself knows in himself that he has a duty and a responsibility of doing good and behaving following a certain unspoken guideline that comes naturally with the responsibility of killing an animal.
I love the idea. I love the fact. I love that you've said that it's because everything is, in the moment, when we are obviously great storytellers around a campfire after the fact, but in the moment we aren't storytellers because
No.
we are so engaged in it. Do you think, though, based on everything we've just said, this whole podcast, habitats changing, people's changing, attitudes changing, more people, do we have to become? I know the answer, right? I know we have to become better communicators. I know it's like this. How do we do that? Like, how do you think we should do that? Like, I know I do, what we do every single day. We push narrative out, we build videos, we build documentaries. We've got some strategic marketing strategies in which we can get messages into the general public, the non-hunting majority, the 4 out of the 5 French people that do not agree with hunting.
It's a difficult question, but I believe that we can answer it if we take a step back and see things a bit bigger. Because we say always that actions speak louder than words. So that's one thing. Being examples in the way that we lead our personal life outside of hunting is very important, because that will be the element that people will remember. It's how we make them feel and how we made them think, rather than what we said. And then the second thing is that we're all equipped with a super powerful, tiny little camera in our hand that allows us to either do very good or do absolute great damage. And our responsibility is probably to, well, first of all, take our responsibility and establish truth where there is misunderstanding without being confronted, because conflict is not necessary, but and it's not a matter of being right or wrong, but it is a matter of kindly educating. And kindly educating doesn't mean being kind and being nice and being tolerant and letting things be said and letting be, being trampled. It simply means that we are speaking in a way that there is sans équivoque. I don't know how to say that in English. It's basically that.
I don't know how to say that in English either.
We cannot, any person who has a desire to look into the topic will be able to understand and probably ally themselves at the cause. And the last thing I would say is the hunting discussion doesn't need to be a conflict at all. It needs to be talked about. It needs to be the beauty needs to be shown, and getting people to understand that would probably be achieved by showcasing the beauty and the great effort. So not how hard we are working, but how beautiful we are working to something that has got a bigger meaning than us. Because in the end, that's that. We are protecting species, we are protecting environments, we are growing things, we are leaving a legacy. And the only way to leave a legacy is by doing good and showcasing the beauty that it is in the future as well.
Yeah, we have some great things that we can hang our hats on. We've got some great things that we do for wildlife and habitat and whatnot. And I think we just need to start championing those messages more.
Yeah.
We just need to, and I think it comes again people being confident and comfortable talking about it and having the information at their fingertips, information planted in their brains, seed planted. It's all just reiterative type of stuff. Like, oh man, if I just knew, how many roe deer are in France, and I can have a dinner conversation with someone going, I'm gonna use whitetails as an example. Let's use whitetails in the States. We have 32 million whitetail in America. I didn't know we had that many. Oh, did you know that in 1900s, at the beginning of the turn of the century, there was only 300,000 whitetails? And they've grown to 32 million because of regulations, policies, hunters, but also, obviously people looking after wildlife. looking after whitetails.
Hmm.
But 6 million whitetail are taken every single year.
Yes.
And the population remains 32 million every single year.
Do you think that for people who are absolutely not familiar with the world of hunting, that numbers are actually saying anything?
I think that simple statistics, simple facts around the natural world invokes curiosity of people that they don't have to be hunters to be curious about the natural world and how it works. I
That's
think
true.
everybody has a natural curiosity around it. So us as hunters being able to impart knowledge on this curiosity and
Yes.
how nature becomes better because of this action or this action or this action or this action. Especially in a world of pressure coming on those habitats constantly.
Mm.
It's such a good message.
It is. It
And
is a
then you
very good
layer on top
message.
of that a human emotion
Mm-hmm.
of, not that we certainly, some people have a range of emotions when it comes to being sad around animals being taken and whatnot, but you add those two elements, I think that's the most powerful storytelling in the world.
It is a strong storytelling for sure. It's very powerful. I'm always wondering how, outside of numbers, we can communicate it more. Because, for example, if you're thinking about meat in the supermarket, we don't talk about how much meat is being thrown away every single day in supermarkets. Meat that is coming from Brazil, that is coming from Eastern Europe, when the nation itself selling that meat is actually producing it, and is actually exporting it because its own supermarket doesn't want to sell it. I'm wondering if we could, with the help of Hunters Federation, orient the discussion towards also that part of things where we are lobbying for more local selected meat. So either game, because there's new laws in Belgium that are coming that actually have been passed where it's easier for a hunter to sell its game
Amazing.
which is
Amazing.
fantastic. It's beautiful. Same in France. There is the need of those initiatives to make it more, well, physical, I would say, for people who are not very
more
mathematical.
tangible, right? They understand it. They can see it. They can see it in the grocery stores. Oh, this is where this came from. Oh, there's a management element of it. Oh, we have too many of them. Oh, okay. Oh, it's really healthy for me. Oh, it's organic. Oh, it came within 100 kilometers of this area. The locavore movement. There are communities out there that may not be hunting communities.
No.
Especially the food and locavore, like local community sourced kind of communities, that I guarantee you, if you polled those people, I reckon your statistics in France would flop to 4 out of 5 people saying I'm for hunting.
Probably.
1 out of 5 saying not.
Probably. The thing with hunting is, as we were saying earlier, people who are not hunters and who have no past or heritage in hunting can only imagine what it is, so they can't feel it or they can't experience it. And it's always a bit delicate to take a person on a hunt simply because of, well, again, the great responsibility that comes with it, because you want to introduce this practice safely to individuals, but making them participate in that life with, for example, actions such as wildlife spotting. How many roe deer did you spot on your drive today, and roughly in which area? That would be making them take responsibility in something that is so far from their daily life. Even though maybe we will never use that data, but the data exists. That means that data that exists can always be used for whatever purpose. Maybe it won't be immediate as a result of, does it actually mean anything? But it will get people in the mindset, I believe, to be more inclined to understand what's happening outside of the hunting months of the year.
Yeah, I think, look, I'm a positive outlook kind of guy, and I think we've already we're already starting to see a tide change. I think
Absolutely.
hunters and the narrative around hunting, I think people are waking up to the idea of like, oh, geez, we should be doing all of these kinds of things. And, the support that we receive and what we do, comes from all corners of the world now,
Yes.
which is quite amazing. And, when I wake up in the morning and this phone is completely full of messages from all over the world, it blows my mind every single day. Man, that is awesome. I'm so glad we got to meet you. This is the kinds of conversations that we love. And you were in the beginning of this podcast saying to me, like, what are we going to talk about, Robbie? And we're talking about overlanding. Are we talking about land roving? Because that's my passion. I know that. And we'll have you back to talk about that kind of stuff. But as soon as we started talking, and you just run down a rabbit hole and you just never know where you end up, right? And here we are an hour later.
You're great for that, Robbie. Thank you very much. You facilitated that a lot.
I'll end with this because this will just be a personal piece. How do you know Manny? So Manish Galalabi introduced us via email to get you on this podcast, and thank you, Manny. I really appreciate it. But how do you know Manny? And does he send you as many memes as he sends you me?
Yes, I think that
He's that friend.
Manny is absolutely fantastic, passionate and vocal in the best possible way about the topic that we discussed today. And I believe that when similar interests collide, people can only keep on talking, basically. So we met because of similar interest. In 2019, I was driving from Singapore to London as part of an expedition called Glass Overland. He followed that expedition, and then we started talking online because of Land Rovers initially. And then I kept on doing other projects involving Land Rovers. And I realized that he was into hunting and he liked guns. And we had, when you start to, specifically on social media, when you start to exchange memes with people, you try and see how far you can go. Like, what's the level or type of memes that are going to be okay or not? And it was quite fun because very quickly we realized that we had similar views and outlooks on hunting, overlanding, and the activities around that. And voila, it has been a friendship that has now been lasting for the last, I think, 4 or 5 years.
Amazing. And have you met really Manny?
Good. We haven't effectively met. We've talked a lot of times. We've got whole, like, for example, we had a very long phone conversation the other day about habitat reduction and the problem that it causes for wildlife. And that's one amongst many. And the thing that's really fun is that Doug Belton from the writer, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, I'm so sorry, Doug, basically was in Atlanta and Manny was in Atlanta. And I knew both of them, and I got them to meet in Atlanta.
Who did you get to meet? Because I met Manny in Atlanta for the first time.
Doug or Doug, D-O-U-G. I don't know how to pronounce it in English.
Yes. D-O-G. Yes. What's his last name?
And let me just read it out to you because I don't want to butcher his name.
Sure.
He's named Pelton. P-E.
Pelton, yeah, Doug Pelton.
Yes.
Yeah, Outdoorsman's Classics or something like that is his Instagram handle. Yeah.
Yes. And basically, they were both in Atlanta. So I got them, I put them in touch. And that thing led to an Instagram group message.
I'm sure. I can only imagine between the two of them. I'm a big fan of Doug as well. He did a big piece on the elephant documentary we just released called The Fine Balance. Good job. Well, Therese, I hope that we are going to, and I might have been butchering your name the entire time. I apologize.
It's Thérèse-Marie.
Thérèse-Marie.
There you go.
So I have been. Next time I will not be, I won't just say Therese. Thérèse-Marie.
There you go.
Thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed that. And if you want to discuss anything that comes across your plate that you think is controversial, or you want to have an open discussion about it, you know how to get a hold of me now. And
It's
so
very kind.
let's just do it, okay?
That's very kind, Robbie. Thank you so much.